pessoal, tudo bem com vocês? E sejam bem-vindos a mais um episódio de Lendo em Inglês com o livro The Star Shepherd. E hoje a gente vai ler juntos aí o capítulo 20, tá? Espero que a gente saiba aí o que aconteceu com o pai do Carol agora, né? Eles saíram, o Carol e a Andra foram aí atrás do pai dele, eles estão sabendo de um pouco mais do que aconteceu com o pai, pelo menos mais ou menos, né? Souberam para onde o pai dele foi para início de conversa e eles saíram atrás. Então vamos ver aí, né, o que vai acontecer. Se você é novo no canal, a playlist para você conseguir acompanhar a história aí do Lendo em Inglês desde o capítulo 1 eu vou deixar aqui. E se você tá aqui de volta, vamos lá pro capítulo 20. Lembrando que o ideal é que primeiro você escute a minha leitura em inglês para você ir pegando a pronúncia e depois que você leia em voz alta. Se você tem o livro, você já pode ir fazendo essa atividade. Eu vou deixar o link para compra do livro aqui na descrição. Se você não tem como adquirir o livro, vou deixar a legenda aqui e aí você pode assistir o vídeo com o áudio para você ir pegando a pronúncia e aí depois você volta no início do vídeo e muta o vídeo para você ir lendo as legendas em voz alta, para você ir praticando essa leitura, para você treinar a fala, a pronúncia, a leitura, ok? Que é o objetivo desse vídeo. Então vamos lá. Chapter 20. As they hurried through the forest, Carol consulted the map he still had in his pack. There were two ways to reach Romvi. They could cut through the Ergzada Valley desert, or they could travel the steep hills that edged it. The hills were technically the shorter path, but it would take them much longer to cross. The desert looked like it would be their best bet. Thankfully, the Ergzada Valley, while still dangerous, wasn't anywhere near as bleak or treacherous as the Black Lands. Carol sighed. If only Romvi were a port town, maybe Captain Salban could give them a ride there and made the journey faster. As it was, they should reach Romvi by late afternoon if they were lucky, but only if they didn't stop to rest. Carol explained the options to Andra, and they decided to press on for the desert without stopping at Carol's watchtower to pick up more supplies. Andra had brought a little money, which apparently Salvan had guilted her father into giving her, so they could buy food. They'd split the remaining supplies already in Carol's pack on the way. Ever since Doman had told Carol his father was headed to Romvi, an odd feeling had begun to well up inside him. Carol had loved Romvi. It was where he and his family had been happy. Back when his mother was still alive, life had been filled with friends, family, and laughter. In Dran, all of those things were in short supply. Returning to Romvi only reminded Carol of what he'd lost. He couldn't imagine what would take his father there now. "How does your father know the captain?" Carol asked. The more he learned about Salban, the more his curiosity grew. Her connections to the Star Shepherds had made her all the more interesting. She said something about hanging out on the docks when they were kids, so they must have known each other growing up. My dad did want to be a sailor for a time before he decided to take over his parents' bakery. Andra shrugged. Who knows? I'm just glad it worked in my favor, she grinned, and Carol laughed. It wasn't long before the forest thinned. The ground beneath their feet turned grainy and dry, and the plants grew sparser and farther apart. Soon the yellow sands of the Ergzada Valley were turning in front of them in great sloping waves. Unlike the Black Lands, there were skeletal remains of long-lost structures clawing out from the ground here. It was smooth, rolling sand as far as the eye could see. It almost looked like no one had ever disturbed the dunes before. Carol shivered. The Black Lands had been disconcerting, but this seemed so vast, like it might swallow them whole. Carol and Cypher paused before the sands, and Andra wrinkled her nose at them. "Are you all right?" Carol tried to laugh, but it came out more like a groan. "I was just thinking that I've already had my fill of deserts this week," he shrugged. "But there's no help for it." And with that, they set out into the yawning expanse before them. Andrew spoke first. "How did the council meeting go? Did they agree to let your father remain a star shepherd?" Carol's shoulders lumped. Amid all the excitement, he had almost forgotten about the council's terrible verdict. "No, they didn't." "But why not?" Andrew kicked at a crest of sand, spraying the fine stuff in front of her. "I couldn't defend his actions to their satisfaction, and not enough of them believed what I had to say about the stars being cut down. Both of us are now banned from touching the stars." Andrew placed a hand on Kyle's shoulders and squeezed. "What an awful thing to do. You were just trying to make things right after all. It isn't fair for them to punish you for it." Carl picked up a wayward pebble, rubbing the smooth stone between his thumb and forefinger, then tossed it at the horizon. It skipped over the sand as if it were water. "I wish they hadn't. There was nothing I could say to change their minds. They'd decided before I got there." Andrew's hands balled into fists at their sides. "Well, that's just not right. I'd tell them that if they were here." Carol gave his friend a half-hearted smile. "Thanks." The sun rose higher, and the day grew hotter and drier. Soon they were sweltering as they trudged through the sands. They were about halfway to Rumville when Cypher, who had been running ahead, yapped. Carol's heart leapt, and he broke into a run. He hadn't forgotten the last time Cypher had run off in a desert. He'd almost lost him. When he reached his dog, Carol was relieved to see Cypher wasn't in trouble, but he had certainly found something. Andra caught up to him and stopped short. "What on earth is that?" Cypher pawed at something sticking out of the sand. They knelt down to examine it. "It looks like some kind of metal canister," Carol said, shaking his head. "But I couldn't tell you what it was for, or why it looks like someone tore it in half," Andrew said, eyeing the jagged edges. Cypher began to dig more determinedly around it, and Carol and Andrew helped to free the metal object. But the deeper they dug, the clearer it became that this wasn't a mere canister. There was a bend farther down. It was hard work, but their curiosity was at the boiling point. They had to know what this was. Finally, they removed enough sand to yank the huge object free. They stumbled back, nearly dropping their prize. This was definitely not a canister. It was a gigantic mechanical arm, taller than Cairo, ripped off whatever body it had once belonged to, with an elbow joint and a forearm that ended in grasping metal fingers. Cairo's heart pounded in his ears. He couldn't help remember his mother's stories about the metal giants. This arm was big enough to belong to one of them. "How's this possible?" Andrew asked, astonished. "I don't know," Carol said. "It reminds me of the story of the giants, but they've been gone for centuries." Andrew touched the arm in awe. "Maybe this is one of the ancient ones. Maybe fell out here in the dunes centuries ago, and we just found it now." She swept her arm at the desert surrounding them. "Who knows what else might be buried out here?" As she spoke, something else glinted in the sun and caught Cairo's eye. He left the mechanical arm on the sand and ran toward the glimmering object. When he reached it, his heart took a seat in his throat. It was unmistakable, a thing he would recognize anywhere. a star hook, severed in a clean cut, just like the ones he and Andrew had found not long ago. Andrew gasped behind him, then shouted, "Look, there's another one!" Sure enough, another severed hook rested nearby. They found several more in the area, but try as they might, not a single burlap casing or star heart was anywhere to be found. It was as though someone had taken them and left only the hooks behind, and perhaps that arm, though that last bit seemed too impossible to imagine. "What do you think happened here?" Andrew asked. Carol shivered. "I don't know, but if it has anything to do with the stars, it might be related to my father's disappearance." Andrew grew serious and tucked the star hook she was holding into her bag. "Then we best get going and find out." Gente do céu, a história tá só piorando, no sentido de que só tem mais e mais perigo aparecendo. Como que 2 crianças de uns 12 anos vão resolver isso? Enfim, a gente tem que suspender um pouquinho aí a crença para entrar num livro infantil, né, infanto-juvenil. Geralmente em livros escritos para crianças, geralmente o herói é uma criança, tipo Harry Potter, né? Mas enfim, então é isso aí, pessoal. A gente terminou aqui o capítulo 20. Espero que vocês tenham gostado. Muito obrigada por ter chegado até aqui. Quem gostou, clique em gostei, que isso me ajuda bastante. Se inscrevam no canal. Se você gosta desses vídeos, né, de lendo em inglês, eu tenho uma playlist bem grande aqui no canal, dá uma conferida. Se você conhece outras pessoas que estão aprendendo inglês, que você acha que gostariam de treinar a leitura também, pode enviar os meus links para essas pessoas. Quando vocês recomendam o canal para outras pessoas, isso me ajuda bastante, ajuda o canal a crescer. Então, muito obrigado para todas as pessoas que podem recomendar aí o canal. E a gente vai continuar se falando nos próximos vídeos, pessoal. Tchau!